How mission is lost. In previous segments of this talk, I defined mission as the energy and desire of an enterprise and developed some simple diagnostic tools to determine when the required mission is missing. In the next segment, I will explain how you can nurture and grow missionary zeal. But before you can do that, we need to explore the different ways in which mission is lost so that you know how to stop energy leaking away. Only once you have plugged any holes can you start to safely regenerate new missionary zeal. On May 1st, 2003, the 43rd President of the United States stood on the deck of the USS Abraham Lincoln to describe the status of an armed invasion of Iraq. Behind him, a large banner declared, "Mission accomplished." For many viewers, the banner suggested the fighting would quickly end. So as insurgency swept through Iraq, the banner seemed unwise. In the months that followed, GW's opponents mocked this as evidence of hubris, dishonesty, or naivety. But to judge the mission accomplished banner, you have to know what the mission was. If the mission was to remove the regime of Saddam Hussein, the mission was accomplished. But if the mission was to establish a friendly and stable Iraq, it wasn't. At the time, as the US and UK got dragged further into battle, there was talk of mission impossible, mission failure, mission creep, and mission retreat. I'm going to chew on this example a little, not as a political critique, but to explore these characterizations and so tease out some lessons for our own mission management. If the White House strategists thought the mission was simply the removal of the existing regime in Iraq, then they were wrong because the US didn't disengage when the regime fell. So what could have happened here? Well, they may have found the mission impossible. Perhaps they planned to leave immediately but just couldn't. I think this is unlikely. There are more plausible explanations than such naivety. It's possible that what happened was mission creep, where the mission was launched with modest objectives, which were then superseded by loftier ambitions. That charge was certainly made at the time. Winning the peace is proving much harder than winning the war, and this wasn't clearly expressed when the mission began. Did the mission have a clear exit criteria? The question was regularly asked. A third option, the other possibility, is that the planners always knew they had to establish stability in Iraq, but were not agreed on how this would be done. So it was politically easier to highlight the quick win of the war than to scrutinise the lack of consensus about how to win the peace. If that is what happened, and I suspect it is, hiding such a disagreement behind a misstatement of mission was a behaviour we can learn from. The inability to openly affirm that the mission was the creation of a friendly and stable Iraq was a clear symptom that the planners didn't agree on the plan. The issue wasn't a failure of mission, it was something more practical. The apparent creep in mission was an indication of planning failure. Mission creep can express itself in a number of ways, but is usually evidence of a political failure in the enterprise, and we will come back to this topic shortly. So the mission in Iraq should probably be judged as ongoing when George Bush stood on the deck. The mission wasn't accomplished. But it wasn't fair to say that the mission had failed. In the decade or more since that voter call, a number of visions for the future of Iraq have been presented. To date, none has been sustained, so the planning failed. But the mission can't have failed because the US still works to achieve a stable and friendly Iraq. For a while, it seemed the US public was so tired of this conflict that they might settle for a hostile and unstable Iraq. If that had been the case, the mission would have failed. If mission's energy, once all energy is gone, there is no mission. And for a while, the US seemed to be running out of the energy required to sustain a commitment to Iraq. However, at the time of recording this talk, the emergence of ISIS seems to have re-energized the US public and its politicians to stay engaged. So the mission hasn't failed. Failure is still a possibility, but it's not a reality. So let's recap. What have we learned from a quick look at the Iraq War? If mission is about the motivation and energy of an enterprise rather than specific planning, failure should be measured on that basis. Mission failure arises not because a target is missed, it arises when nobody cares enough to pick up the pieces and try again. A missed target may be the catalyst for everyone to say, enough, no more now. But in that case, you might suspect that the missionary zeal had been lost some time earlier. Mission creep, by contrast, indicates that there is some big fat lie at the heart of management. It may be that the original mission was willfully misstated, or it may be that management is developing some new mission. Either way, someone is trying to avoid necessary scrutiny of their actions. It's a really dangerous place for the enterprise, as management is setting objectives that it may not have the resources to achieve. Scope creep often ends in disaster. Mission retreat, reducing the ambitions of the enterprise, is often characterised as weakness by opponents. That's unfair. It usually suggests that the original mission is failing, and if management is acknowledging that truth, mission retreat can be a positive step to some necessary resolution. Indeed, if the original mission was impossible, it may be the only option. So how should you manage mission failure and mission creep? Let's start with mission creep. Avoiding mission creep is a political discipline. There are 3 ways you can mess up. The first is to tell yourself that there is no politics in your enterprise. Politics is an absolute part of the human condition, a legacy of the tribal character of all primates. There's always politics. The question is only whether it's constructive or obstructive. The second, which we saw in an earlier segment in our review of mission statements, is to indulge in ambiguity. If people in your team are playing obstructive politics, you must be able to highlight how these actions undermine the mission of the enterprise in order to challenge their behaviours. You may have to go back and define that mission statement clearly in order to expose the political dynamic that's holding the enterprise back. Disagreements can be very positive. I've always liked Toyota's message that conflict builds good cars, but disagreement must be resolved. Be sure that the ambitions for the enterprise are unambiguous and acknowledged by all. Third, failure mechanism is appeasement. If in the final analysis you are faced with opposition that cannot share a common sense of mission with the bulk of the leadership team, you should not accommodate internal competition for long. The real competition is external. By all means debate mission, but once you have a general consensus, any remaining dissenters have 2 legitimate options: stay and buy into the mission, or go. You may have to force the issue. One of your key roles as a leader is to minimise the energy lost to internal politics and to focus it back into the external world. So mission creep is usually the result of political instability, which can be painful to eradicate, but generally you only go through the pain once and it's done. Once the politics is fixed, building trust and shared mission in your team should prevent any new outbreaks. For you, as a manager, the more mundane but more demanding challenge is to encourage the strong sense of missionary zeal needed for growth during the day-to-day grind of work. Avoiding mission failure is more challenging than avoiding mission creep because the task never ends. The difficulty of managing missionary zeal is that it's intangible. We don't traditionally keep score of the strength of mission within the enterprise. Worse, after that energy is lost, the activity of the enterprise doesn't immediately stop. People keep doing what they always did, even if less well. The bigger the organisation, the longer it takes to wind down. You can be fooled into thinking the problem is not severe when it is, and you will not improve or grow your enterprise without some missionary zeal. Once it's lost, even if the enterprise rolls along under its own momentum for a while, you will not be able to respond to competitive pressures or external change. So decline is eventually inevitable. So if you believe that your enterprise may be suffering from a lack of missionary zeal, what can you do? This will be the topic of discussion for the next segment of this talk.